Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jam Vishnupad Param Sivaraj Kachara Shtottara Shata Sivai Grace Vacharan Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Krantarachima Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Today we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, Text 8. Apam viryasya sargasya pachanyasya prajapate pumsa shishna upastastu prachatyananda nivritte. Apam viryasya sargasya pachanyasya prajapate pumsa shishna upastastu prachatyananda nivritte. Apam viryasya sargasya pachanyasya prajapate Pumsa Shishna Upastastu Prachatyananda Nivritte. Apam viryasya sargasya Parchanyasya Prajapate Pumsa Shishna Upastastu Prachatyananda Nivritte. Word to word, apam, of water, viryasya, of the semen, sargasya, of the generative, pachanyasya, of rains, prajapate, of the Creator, Pumsaha, of the Lord, Shishnaha, the genitals, Upastaha, too, the place where the genitals are situated, Prachati, due to begetting, Ananda, pleasure, Nivrittihe, cause. Translation and purport by Divine Grace of Acharya Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. From the Lord's genitals originate water, semen, generatives, rains and procreators, His genitals are the cause of a pleasure that counteracts the distress of begetting. Purport. The genitals and the pleasure of begetting counteract the distresses of family encumbrances. One would cease to generate altogether if there were not, by the grace of the Lord, a coating, a pleasure-giving substance on the surface of the generative organs. This substance gives a pleasure so intense that it counteracts fully the distress of family encumbrances. A person is so captivated by this pleasure-giving substance that he is not satisfied by begetting a single child, but increases the number of children with great risk in regard to maintaining them, simply for this pleasure-giving substance. This pleasure-giving substance is not false, however, because it originates from the transcendental body of the Lord. In other words, the pleasure-giving substance is a reality, but it has taken on an aspect of a pervertedness on account of material contamination. In the material world, sex life is the cause of many distresses on account of material contact. Therefore, the sex life in the material world should not be encouraged beyond the necessity. There is a necessity for generating progeny, even in the material world, but such generation of children must be carried out with full responsibility for spiritual values. The spiritual values of life can be realized in the human form of material existence, and the human being must adopt family planning with reverence to the context of spiritual values and not otherwise. The degraded form of family restriction by use of contraceptives, etc., is the grossest type of material contamination. Materialists who use these devices want to fully utilize the pleasure potency of the coating on the genitals by artificial means without knowing the spiritual importance. And without knowledge of spiritual values, the less intelligent man tries to utilize only the material sense pleasure of the genitals. Amma Kyanati Manandasya Krananjana Shalakaya Chaksharan Militam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutare Svayam Rupakara Mayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrachatam Sahagana Rakunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvitam Savadutam Paritana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamshcha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhana Sute Devi Pranamame Hare Priya Vancha kalpatarabhashcha kripa sindhibhavacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shiva Sarigora Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, thank you for coming, watching on Mayapur TV. Some who are following our Srimad Bhagavatam classes, where we are in the second canto now, chapter 6, called Purusha Sukta Confirmed, and on text 8, where we are hearing the description of the universal form of the Lord in its different aspects, which was already in the previous chapter as well. And today we hear about the Lord's genitals. Interesting topic. So Srila Prabhupada starts off the purport by explaining that, like Lord Brahma himself tells here in the verse as well to Narad Muni, that the second sentence, that his genitals are the cause of a pleasure that counteracts the distress of begetting. So in other words, Srila Prabhupada explains that it is only because of this pleasure that, like we know that Lord Brahma, that's how he was able to facilitate the process, so to say, for population in the material world, for a progeny by putting this pleasure-giving coating on the generative organs, as Prabhupada explains here as well. And only by that are the conditioned souls so strongly driven to run after this pleasure with all the struggle that comes along with it, by then like the verse says, the counteracts the distress of begetting. Like we know, even begetting itself, at least, like for the mother, is like such a painful exercise or thing to experience. We know all the even during pregnancy, all those months, like about 9 months, for the mother is like it's obviously there's so much austerity involved in that as well. Different pains you can experience, or and how she always has to be very careful in her lifestyle, and then obviously giving birth is like super painful, and so many complications can there be that even the mother might even die, and the child and everything. So first of all, that itself, and then of course, like Prabhupada puts immediately to the side of then counteracting the distress of family encumbrances. So meaning then all the austerities that come along then with actually maintaining a family, and which especially in today's age we know is getting more and more difficult. That's why we hear like from previous ages where Kshatriyas were able to have so many wives, some of them at least, and nowadays someone is in Kali Yuga, men are proud if they are able to maintain one wife and with 1 or 2 children, which is so first to this point of we were last 2 days we were hearing here online from 2 classes, 2 recordings from His Holiness Bhakti Charan Maharaj in honor of him, of course, now at these times especially. So, and he was telling in the class we heard yesterday, when at the end of the class someone asked about how can it be that, because he was explaining about the 2 main Kshatriya dynasties, the sun from the sun and from the moon, and in case of the moon, so one devotee was asking how do we understand that the moon dynasty, it starts off with all those like quite like not by not following religious principles, by the moon god himself, by begetting a child in another's wife. And so the question was then, how come then that Krishna chooses to appear in this dynasty, which he is the foremost upholder, of course, of religious principles, but he chooses to appear in such a dynasty which starts off with irreligion. So Maharaj was explaining that a few sides to it, but one thing he said is that even though such things might happen there also, but still we have to understand that those personalities we read in Srimad Bhagavatam, like the moon god and all those residents of higher planets, they are so much more exalted than us, and so that's one thing one should keep in mind. But with this in mind, then it shows even more how powerful this illusory pleasure in one sense, but in another sense, like Prabhupada says, it's also real. It is some pleasure, but it is, of course, illusory in the sense that we identify with the material body by doing that, and that we think that would really be able to ultimately make us happy, which it can't, obviously. But it's simply a main mechanism of Maya, of the illusory energy, to keep us bound here. but yeah, how even such exalted personalities, even they can become bewildered, even although they otherwise follow so strictly such a high standard of religion and everything. And then, like one other reason, of course, is that is by Krishna's appearing in this dynasty, by his very appearance, of course, the whole dynasty automatically becomes purified. So, which also shows us that in this material world, there is always, even in those most exalted realms and with most exalted personalities, still there will always be contamination and always be problems. But simply by the presence of Krishna, everything becomes perfect, even here. So, which means for us in our life, of course, whatever we go through and whatever we have to deal with, if we keep Sri Srila Gopinath in the center, Srila Prabhupada's instructions and everything, then it becomes perfect still. Like Krishna also explains in, I think, in 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, how in the material world there's always contamination. Like the example given with in a fire, that there's where there's fire, there's always smoke as well, but you don't stop using the fire just because there's smoke which might disturb, which might have bad smell and give a burning sensation to your eyes and all those things, but rather you still take advantage of the fire. And so that's the same in the material world, in all activities as well, that there is always shortcomings and faults, but if we keep Krishna in the center, then it still will be perfect. And then the next point Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport is that a person, like, it's even more so on the same point, that a person is so captivated by this pleasure-giving substance that he's not satisfied by begetting a single child, but increases the number of children with great risk in regard to maintaining them simply for this pleasure-giving substance. So it shows how it blinds the intelligence running after material pleasure, that, and especially in this form, that which is so so forceful, that even especially nowadays, like I mentioned, where it's not such a easy given thing that you can properly maintain a family, but people they lose the intelligence in thinking about how then the long-term consequence. Of course, nowadays, like that's how Prabhupada at the end of the purport mentions that, unfortunately nowadays, of course, with our people are so-called more advanced, that they circumvent that by using contraceptive methods and abortion and all of those things, to still madly run after this pleasure without taking on the responsibility which naturally comes, as it is given by nature, to then take care and raise children. But that's, of course, like Prabhupada says, the grossest form of material contamination. And so then next point Prabhupada makes is that this pleasure-giving substance, like I mentioned before, it is a reality, but it has taken on an aspect of pervertedness on account of material contamination. And reading this sentence alone, I was thinking if that might be something that many people would want to take advantage of course, that they, like we heard by His Grace Toshin Krishna Prabhu in his Chaitanya Charitamrita classes especially, where he described all the different asampradayas, and like one type of them, I'm not sure which one exactly, maybe just the Sahajiyas, that they their philosophy is that they union of male and female, this act is actually the central sadhana of realizing the union, spiritual union as well, of like imitate like Radha and Krishna, but which is obviously the complete bogus. But yeah, people would want, of course, to think themselves still spiritual and tell, yeah, and like in a sentence like here where we also hear it's coming also from the Lord, that then saying, yeah, it's also spiritual. But of course, that's why we need guidance of someone like Srila Prabhupada here and the purpose of what it actually means. That yes, everything, I mean, we know ultimately everything comes from the Lord, but material world altogether, we know it's a perverted reflection of the spiritual world, and that's what he explains here as well, that it, in the next sentence, that in other words, the pleasure-giving substance is a reality, same sentence, but it has taken on an aspect of pervertedness on account of material contamination. So, and thus, yeah, sex love is the cause of many distresses, and like that it continues. And yeah, then he explains what the responsibility that comes along with it, which is unfortunately not fulfilled nowadays. Like I said, nowadays they don't even want to take on the material responsibility, what to speak of the actual important responsibility that comes as a parent to give spiritual knowledge to the children and teach them spiritual values. So, so then he concludes with that nowadays they use those artificial means to trying to still squeeze out this pleasure. And so with this last point of that they want to use artificial means, I was thinking that it shows that how nowadays human beings are actually even worse than animals, because animals, for them, nature has given their, like, everything is fully controlled by nature. They don't have the consciousness developed highly enough that they can choose to act beyond their very giving nature, and they just act according to their instinct. So for them, they don't have a possibility like for contraceptive methods or something like this. Whereas human beings, we who have this higher intelligence, of course, which is meant to be used for spiritual realization, to then ultimately get out of the material world again, but instead we misuse this high intelligence to like develop things, technologies, and all different sorts of to avoid taking on the responsibility of begetting children while enjoying this pleasure. And so that's one. And I mean, and that obviously also shows us how intense the consequences must be of if we do like that, because it's like such an extreme misuse of intelligence that it's doing the complete opposite. And by doing that, of course, obviously not just spoiling one's own life, but also killing other living beings, especially in case of abortion, where the child is already developed, which they try to somehow justify, of course, in different ways of it's not to define life only then at a certain point, or to define it as a human being only at a certain point, things like this. But obviously that's unfortunately how degraded we are nowadays. And in regard to that, I was thinking with the animals that we might seeing animals suffering in their lives as it is given by nature, we might feel also compassion upon them, which is good in general, but for, like I said, they simply live their life according to the nature, how it is given, and they fulfill the term of how as it is given by karma, that then after that life then they get elevated to the next species until eventually to the human form of life again, which means also that first of all, like, because people with no spiritual knowledge, they might think that those like if they see so if they see animals, they think that they are completely innocent, which is not the case, as we know. Like every single living being in this material world is not innocent. Everyone is here with having misused and misusing his independence to rebel against Krishna, and then having accrued different sinful activities, which the consequences of which we suffer. And so first of all, they're not innocent, and so they simply have to fulfill the term of material existence there of this species until getting elevated to the next one, and which means that as we know, of course, also with human beings, but in that case, maybe even more apparent that there is no point in too much trying to help on the material platform, but rather our main responsibility is always to trying to uplift the consciousness of, first of all, the human beings, of course, because they are meant for spiritual realization, and if people's consciousness is elevated, then naturally the animals will also suffer less if the people are not violent, and if they use nature and everything properly, and so forth. And even, of course, animals, they also benefit from, like when they hear the holy name, or when they're living near a more spiritual atmosphere. And so, in terms of, we know that, so I'll refer now mainly to the last two classes that we heard from the recording of His Holiness Bhaktitara Maharaj. And because, as he mentioned also, that of course sex life is what the main shackles that keep us in this material world. But I was thinking on, it's kind of paradoxical then that with what we heard in yesterday's class is that actually as a proof for the authenticity of the Vedas, the genealogical tables given of all those personalities in the scriptures, like Srimad Bhagavatam, are one main proof of how we can see that that is not something made up, but it's real, and so which shows in one sense that actually it's also used, this form of progeny can be in that way beneficial for us, enabling this genealogical tables. And sorry, 1 second. So I'll just try to repeat a few points that I got from yesterday's class. So how he explained, how is it such a proof? Because in any other, like the accusation obviously is that people say and think that the scriptures are simply mythology. So they're just nice stories at best, giving us some moral lessons in life, which is nice to read, but that there is no substance behind it. And he gave examples of, like, if it were mythology, or in other words something just like fairy tales, then which fairy tale do we know where there's all the characters given, where we would know the genealogical table? Like most of the time we don't even know the parents, or to speak then of like, he went back to like about grandfather, great grandfather, like for example of say, like someone like Superman, who knows the father, great grandfather, great grandfather, etc. No one, because it's made up, and no one. What would be the point of making up so many names? So whereas in the Shastras, yeah, we can go all the way up until to the very origin, which is Krishna himself, of course. But before that, even in the material world, in this very creation also, where we can go all the way back to Lord Brahma, and as Maharaj explained, from Lord Brahma, we know that he's of course so much more elevated than we are. He's the most elevated in this universe. So for him, the process of procreation, as we hear it in today's verse, is not necessarily like that. But we know there's quite a few personalities who appear from Lord Brahma in different ways, like the sons, the great rishis which come from his mind, and different personalities, and who like when he even when he gives up a body, we know that beings are born out of that of that body or from his shadow and all different things. But so then the actual normal process of population, as we have it with in human beings, that starts only with Manu, with Swayambhuva Manu, with his wife, I think Shatarupa, what's her name? Yeah, Shatarupa. So they actually only started on this normal process, and that's why we know in Sanskrit humans are Manuja, right? Born from Manu as the original forefather. And so all the way, and like even in Bhagavatam itself, we learned that also recently in connection with the Vedic cosmology in the 4th canto of how, because Maharaj Priyavrata was so instrumental in how our Bhumandala, this planetary system that we are in now, for this structure, namely having made all those divisions of the islands, all those oceans, with driving his chariot, and so there we hear from Swayambhuva Manu all the way to Dhruva Maharaj and all those different great personalities. And another point Maharaj made is, or rather, first, so he gave then the other famous example of Bhagavatam, in connection with complications that come from engaging in this activity, running after this pleasure, and also how rather just as an example also of finding all this different, how the dynasties are there, all those great kings, the names are there, with the story of King Yayati. And got 10 minutes left. Yeah, okay. I'll just briefly go through what I remember. So from the story goes that so that's how it starts off, how Devayani, the daughter of Shukracharya, gets to getting stuck in this well in the forest, is that her one of her friends called Shamishta, I think, as far as I remember, is when they were bathing in the river there, and Lord Shiva came by. Then they quickly ran out to put a cloth on, and at that time her friend Shamishta who was the daughter of a kshatriya, of a king Risha or something, and he by mistake she put on the cloth from Devayani, and that made Devayani so angry that she accused heavily then Shamishta by using words like, because she was the daughter of Shukracharya, of the spiritual master of the demons, so so-called Brahmana at least, and so she accused that how come that like in other words, your position is that of you're dependent on us, on the brahmanas, so how come you dare to touch my cloth? And in turn then Shamishta, using her kshatriya qualities, simply throws her back into the well, or throws her into a well there, and that's how she gets stuck there. And then that's how then one day when King Yayati goes in the forest, hears her cries and rescues her, and so being pulled out on, like taken on by the hand by the king, then she says, well, now you have to marry me, and which he does then. And but on the other hand, with in terms of the other king's daughter Shamishta having offended Shukracharya's daughter Devayani, he approaches Shukracharya to beg for pardon for her offense, and because of course he knows how powerful the brahmanas were in those days. Someone like Shukracharya, he could revive all the demons killed by the demigods, for example, and make Bali Maharaj so powerful that he could conquer the whole Svagaloka. So and so Shukracharya says, I can forgive, but my daughter, for her being able to forgive, you have to send Shamishta, your daughter, to become a maidservant of Devayani, of my daughter. So that's what happens then, and that's then how. But knowing that Shamishta is extremely beautiful, he made Yayati then vow that he would never, of course, engage with Shamishta, but would stay chaste to Devayani, which he did vow. But then, of course, then someday he couldn't, and he even begot, I think, 2 sons in Shamishta as well. And Devayani, when she found out, of course, then they was very upset. But then she, I forgot, did she curse him or did Shukracharya curse him to lose his youth? No, I think Shukracharya, when Devayani went to her father, to Shukracharya, complaining, lamenting about that, then he cursed Yayati, saying, "Oh, you has no sense control. So may you lose your youth, and thus not being able to enjoy in that way again." And of course, Yayati, as we know, he begged for pardon, and Shukracharya eventually then says, "Okay, there's one way what you can do. You can ask one of your sons if they are ready to exchange their youth to you." And so, as we know, all the first 4 sons refused. Only the youngest son, then Puru, agreed, and that's also how he got the blessings then, and how the dynasty continues from Puru. Whereas the other sons, except the first son, Yadu, of course, is then where Krishna appears later, but he got cursed in the way that they will never rule never have their own kingdom and sovereignty. So, whereas then the other sons, we know that Prabhupada explains in some purports how they are actually forefathers then of different nations like Greece and Turkey, and which over time went astray from the Vedic culture. So that's how it originated from there, from King Yayati. And Yayati himself then eventually continuing his life with Devayani until he realizes eventually the futility of material enjoyment, and tells that in a form of a story to Devayani about that, how there was one he-goat who one day in the forest found a she-goat in a well, and then also the story about Shamishta, that there was another she-goat, and his she-goat got angry about it, and so the whole story, and in that way also Devayani realized the futility of endeavoring for material enjoyment, and so then they take vanaprastha and engage fully in devotional service. And so that's from yesterday's class. And okay, our time is almost over. Just very briefly to the class before, was so beautiful as well, where he explained practically, because someone who the whole just all the transcendentalists gradually, how starting off with from karma kanda, where you try for material enjoyment but get frustrated eventually, realizing that no matter how hard I try, it can never give me full satisfaction. And even in what we hear in today's verse about this highest pleasure on the material platform, and thus then arises the question, why I'm trying so hard, but why am I still suffering? So that's how we come to jnana kanda, and then from further, so rather another aspect of this is, because in jnana kanda then understanding, okay, that actually I'm not this body, there's this material body, which Maharaj nicely mentioned, that the material body being is a wonderful instrument to receive pain. And so that's in jnana kanda you try to not engage then in those material activities to realize that you're not the body. But if you go more on the side of wanting to understand what it actually is, what is this body and what is this material world and all of that, that is Sankhya yoga, and which very analyzed, like what we heard recently also in this section of Bhagavatam before the universal form, where we heard about all those elements and how the creation, the sarga, took place. And and eventually we know in Sankhya Yoga perfection is that you find that there is not just the material elements, but beyond that still then the soul and the super soul, and to realize that then comes to the next step of engaging in Ashtanga Yoga, starting off with more physical exercises, and then in coming to pranayama, where you retain the air, etc. And then and the beautiful connection he made here then is that someone who perfects this extremely difficult Ashtanga Yoga, some famous example of Vishwamitra. Of course, we know he meditated for 64,000 years, and still, simply by the tinkling of the ankle bells of Menaka, he opened his eyes, got agitated, and fell down from his spiritual position. That this shows us then that at some point, ultimately, we simply have to surrender to Sharanagati. And surrender being the mother of devotion, which means that only when we come to that point of feeling helpless on our own strength, ready to surrender to the Lord, only then are we ready to actually receive then bhakti, which we obviously can only receive then by the devotees. So, which shows from our side, our responsibilities, we have always to surrender. Being surrendered, then bhakti can come. We cannot create or endeavor for bhakti on our own. Bhakti is causeless. It's causeless mercy, it will always be. But we can at least use our intelligence being, if one is simply a little sane actually and analyzes the material world and our life and everything, then we understand that, we are fully dependent on the Lord's mercy, and thus, we have to surrender, and then bhakti can be given to us. Okay, end here. Thank you. Krantarachim Vapakatam Ke Jai. Srila Prabhupada.